She made something so perfect that even a goddess could not find a flaw in it. So the goddess destroyed it. Greetings, gods. You're in Catheoria now, and this shadow belongs to Arachne. She wove with thread, then with her own body. She never noticed when one became the other. Most people don't. You open the file again, or the spreadsheet, or the draft, or the message you have already rewritten 5 times. Not because you want to, not because anyone asked, because stopping feels like something you're not ready to explain. You fix the detail no one will see. You keep going long after the thing stopped making you happy, because not going means standing in a room with nothing. And nothing in the room is the answer to a question you do not want to ask yet. Somewhere along the way, the work stopped being something you made. It became the way you proved you were still here. This is not the story of a girl punished for pride. It is the story of what happens when the work becomes more dangerous than the person who made it. There was a girl in Lydia who found that out. Her father worked with colour. Not the colour of sunsets, the colour of trade. Purple extracted from sea snails. Boiled down in vats. Soaked into raw wool until the fibres held it like a wound. Tyrian purple. The most expensive pigment in the ancient world. The colour of emperors. Idmon of Colophon handled it every day of his life. He never wore it. His daughter grew up in the smell of that dye, in the weight of thread between fingers. She did not learn weaving the way children learn lessons. She learned it the way lungs learn air. Her name was Arachne, no family name worth speaking of. No god who claimed her. No legend attached to her bloodline. She had her hands. People came from surrounding villages to watch her work, not to see the finished cloth, to watch the hands. The way her fingers moved through the threads without seeming to search for them. The nymphs who lived in the nearby forests and streams, beings who had their own eternities to occupy, would leave their rivers, leave their trees, and stand in the doorway of a mortal girl's workshop just to watch. They were afraid to make noise. They thought if they breathed too loudly, she might stop. And in those moments, the stillness, the light from the high window, the sound of the shuttle and nothing else, there was something true happening. Not performance, not proof, just a girl doing the thing she was made to do, before she knew it could be taken. For a while, that was all it was. Not performance, not proof, just the work. Before anyone asked who taught her. They meant it as a compliment the first time. Surely Athena must have taught you. A nymph said it softly, not as a question, as a gift. Arachne's hands slowed for 1/2 beat, then continued. The next time, it was a merchant from 3 valleys over. He stood examining a finished tapestry and said, to the woman beside him, nodding at Arachne as if she were not there, the goddess herself must have guided those fingers. They did not ask Arachne. They had already decided. The time after that, a traveller said, this is the gift of Pallas, Athena. The goddess touches certain hands, and they become instruments of the divine. Arachne set down her shuttle. She picked it back up, but something was happening slowly. The way a door closes in stages, each too small to hear her name, was beginning to disappear. Not from their mouths, they said it constantly, but from the thing they were actually describing. What they were praising was no longer her. They were praising Athena's investment, Athena's handiwork, expressed through a mortal instrument. Arachne was a medium, or vessel, and the vessel had no say in what it carried. She had no title, No inheritance. One thing indisputably, irreducibly hers. Not talent, she would argue about that later. Her origin. She had learned this herself. No god appeared at her cradle. No divine hand steadied her wrist. She had put in the hours. Alone. In that room. Until her fingers knew things her mind had no words for yet. That was not Athena's gift. That was hers. And now, in the language of every person who had ever praised her, she was being quietly translated from maker to maid. She knew the room had changed when she said it. She said it anyway. So, when the question came again directly, "Openly tell me truly, did Athena teach you?" Arachne answered. Not gently, not modestly. She said no. She said, "What I have, I made." She said, "If the goddess wants to dispute that, let her come and show me something better." The nymph went quiet. Arachne picked up her shuttle and returned to work. She did not look frightened. She did not look triumphant. She looked like someone who had said the true thing and was waiting to find out what it cost. The next morning, an old woman was standing at her door. Traveling cloak. A stick. The kind of old woman you step aside for. She had heard things. She had counsel, the counsel of years. Seek the goddess's forgiveness. She said, "A humble word costs nothing. Athena is merciful to those who ask." Arachne looked at the old woman. She said, "I am not afraid of Athena." She said, "I will weave against her and stand by what I make." She said, "If she is listening, let her come." The old woman's eyes changed. Not gradually, all at once. And the room was different. Arachne thought she had rejected a compliment. She had issued an invitation. She was there. She had been there the whole time, watching from behind borrowed eyes, while a mortal girl said, out loud, what no mortal had dared to say in quite that way. Not "I am better than the goddess." Something worse than that. Something that said, "The goddess is not the source of this. This belongs to me. Come and prove otherwise." Athena shed the disguise. If there was light. Ovid does not need to tell us. The room changed for one reason: the old woman was gone. And Athena was there. The particular silence that follows is hard to describe: the silence of a mortal who has gotten exactly what she asked for and is now holding it. Arachne did not run. She did not apologize. She looked at her hands stained faintly at the cuticles where the dye never fully left. The left thumb rougher than the right from years of pulling thread. The same hands, still hers. And what was it like? To stand across from a goddess with a loom. Arachne had spent years being watched. She was used to eyes on her hands. This was different. The woman across from her was not watching to admire. She was watching the way a judge watches a trial, not to learn, but to rule. Arachne looked at her hands again. They were still the same hands. She set up her loom. They wove in the same room. One goddess, one mortal, two looms, one morning. Everything that happened next happened because of what each of them chose to put in the cloth. Athena chose order. Her contest with Poseidon, the gods gathering to name the city. Poseidon struck the earth a salt spring. Athena struck the earth an olive tree. Parlor green, heavy with fruit. A living thing that would feed people for 1,000 years. The gods chose the olive tree. They chose Athena. She wove this at the center. At each corner, 4 mortals who had claimed equality with gods. 4 images of what happened after. A woman turned to snow. A man reduced to wings. A girl dissolved into a crane. A king's daughters becoming birds of grief. The craft was faultless. Even Arachne, looking across, could not argue with the execution. The figures in her cloth breathed with a kind of authority that went beyond skill woven by someone who had been present for the events she depicted. Athena's tapestry was the world, as craft was supposed to serve it order at the center, warning at the edges. Up to this point, it could still have been a contest. After this, it was no longer a contest. It was a record. Arachne did not weave a response. She wove the other side of the same story. She chose the gods not in their glory, in their other shapes, the ones they wore when they came down into mortal lives and entered under shapes no mortal could recognize in time. Jupiter, 9 times, wearing borrowed forms, bull, eagle, fire, golden rain, crossing thresholds, no mortal knew how to name. Neptune, 6 times, Apollo, 4, Bacchus and Saturn, each once, 21 scenes. Again and again, a god changes shape and enters a mortal story under a form no mortal could recognize in time. The women in the cloth were not idealized, not heroes, not martyrs. They were people caught in moments they had not chosen a woman at a shore, looking at a bull in the shallows, a girl in a sealed room, looking up as the gold began to fall, not yet knowing, but the cloth knew. Arachne did not need to label what was happening. The cloth did it for her. She had recorded what had happened with the same care that Athena had brought to recording what the gods wanted remembered. Athena had woven the world as Olympus told it. Arachne had woven the parts Olympus preferred not to show, both in perfect craft. That was why the room could not hold them both. Athena could have answered a bad tapestry. She could have mocked a careless one. She could have forgiven a young girl's pride and let the mourning become a lesson in humility. But Arachne had used craft, her craft, the language Athena had given the world, the one in which Athena was supposed to be unchallengeable, and used it to say what Athena could not deny. And it was perfect. Ovid calls it caelestia crimina, a phrase that cuts in 2 directions, crimes of heaven or crimes committed by heaven. The Latin does not close cleanly. It leaves the question where Arachne left it open, in the cloth, where anyone who looked could see it. Not even envy could find a flaw. Envy herself, whose entire existence is identifying inadequacy, could not find a single thread out of place. The bull looked wet from the sea. The gold fell like it was still falling. Arachne had done what the best witnesses do. She had not editorialized. She had not added her own grief to the pictures. She had simply put the thing where people could see it with the same skill, the same craft, the same flawless precision that Athena had brought to documenting the world's other version. And it could not be argued with. It could only be looked at, or not. Athena looked at it. The room was quiet. 1 tapestry gods in their power, mortals in their place. The world as it had always been described. 1 tapestry gods in their other shapes, the ones they wore when they came down. Both perfect. They could not both be true. They could not both exist. One of them would have to leave the room. Athena looked at Arachne's tapestry for a long time. She did not speak. The silence lasted exactly long enough for Arachne to believe it might go differently. There is a specific kind of pause that precedes acknowledgement. A held breath. The moment before someone says, "I see what you have done, and I cannot find fault with it." 2 tapestries stood in the same room. One made by the goddess, who invented the craft. One made by the daughter of a dye worker who taught herself alone. And the goddess's tapestry was not better, not technically, not by any standard. In any other story, that would be the ending. The mortal proves herself. The goddess concedes, even reluctantly, even coldly, but concedes. You could see it, the shape of that ending. It was possible. The morning was not over. Arachne did not allow herself to hope exactly. She was too careful for that. Too old for that kind of vulnerability. Too aware of the space between what should happen and what happened in the world where she lived. But she waited. She watched Athena's face. She watched the looking go on. And she waited for the thing that was supposed to come next. The morning was not over. It was still possible. She crossed the room in 3 steps. She took Arachne's tapestry in both hands. And she tore it. Not a clean tear. She tore it the way something is destroyed when the person doing the destroying does not want to look at it any more quickly. Completely. Until there was nothing left that resembled what had been there. The pieces fell to the floor. The bull in the sea. The gold still falling. The 21 scenes that could not be found at fault. All of it on the floor. Athena did not look at the pieces. This is the detail the simpler version of the story leaves out. Athena did not destroy a bad tapestry. She destroyed a perfect one. She could not say your work was wrong, so she destroyed the place where the work could speak. The witness. She did not argue with the tapestry. She did not find a flaw in it. She found the person who made it. The shuttle was still in Arachne's hand. Athena took it. The first blow landed across Arachne's forehead. The second. The third. There is almost nothing in Ovid's account here beyond the counting. He tells us 3 times. That is the record. Arachne did not beg. She did not reach for the pieces of the tapestry. She did not ask why. She understood why. What she could not accept, that the ending of her story would be written by the person who had just destroyed her work. That the last word about Arachne would be Athena's. This is not a triumph. It is not an answer. It is the last act left to someone who believes every other ending has been taken. Some readers see it as a final refusal, not freedom. Not victory, only refusal. Ovid does not linger there. Neither will we. Athena looked at her. Something moved in her what it was. Ovid does not say. He uses a word translated as pity. But this may have been something more complicated than pity. Something that looked like mercy, but had the texture of something else entirely. She reached out. She did not restore Arachne. She did not undo the morning. Ovid's sentence is colder than mercy. In essence, live but hang. She would not let Arachne choose her own ending. She would give her a different one that would last much longer than any morning. The herbs of Hecate were dark and bitter. Her hair fell away. Her face withdrew into something smaller. The fingers the nymphs had come to watch were no longer fingers. The body changed. The thread remained. Under the rafter, a new line held her. Not rope now, silk. And the silk came from inside her own body. Athena left. The loom stood empty. The torn cloth lay on the floor. The poem moves on. It has other transformations to account for. She still weaves, but not like before. Before, Arachne needed thread. Afterward, she did not. Before dyed wool from her father's workshop. Linen thread, sorted by weight. Coloured fibres from merchants on the Lydian trade routes. She stood at a loom. She chose what to put in. She decided, each time, what the cloth would say, what truth it would carry when someone stood before it and looked. The loom was the tool. The thread was the material. She was the one doing it. That distinction mattered. It was, in fact, the whole argument. Afterward, she no longer stood at a loom. She hung. The thread no longer came from outside her. It came from inside her body. She did not work in the high-windowed workshop where nymphs had gathered. She worked in corners, in doorways, in the dark spaces under eaves, where light doesn't reach and people don't look. She wove without choosing, not because she lacked skill, but because what she was doing now was not a choice. In the same way breathing is not a choice. The spider weaves because it is a spider, not because it has something to say. A tapestry can accuse. A web can only be brushed away. Her father had spent his life touching a color that belonged to other people. Arachne spent hers trying to keep one thing from belonging to someone else. Her work, her hands, her origin. And when the work was taken, there was almost nothing left that the world had ever agreed to see. There's a difference between making something because you love it and making something because it's the only proof you have that you exist. She did not choose that trap. Most people don't. They are praised into it, kneaded into it, watched into it, until stopping feels like disappearance. No one calls it a trap while it is happening. They call it talent. They call it discipline. They call it being gifted. They ask for one more piece, one more proof, one more version of the thing you are good at. And slowly, the world forgets how to look at you without asking what you can make next. The question she never got to answer, the one the morning cut off before it could be asked, was whether she would have still loved the weaving if no one had ever come to watch. If the nymphs had stayed in their rivers, if the merchants had passed the village without stopping, if their room had always been empty except for her and the loom and the light from the high window, would she have kept going? Not because she needed to prove something, not because someone was watching, not because stopping would mean disappearing, just because she loved the way the thread moved between her fingers, just because there was a particular satisfaction in the moment when a figure in the cloth began to look like what it was. We don't know the answer. She didn't get to find out. The work continues. The witness disappears. She weaves now in the dark spaces under eaves, pulling the material from herself that she once chose from the world. The loom is gone. The high-windowed workshop is gone. The nymphs who stood in the doorway, afraid to breathe, gone. Back to their rivers and their trees, to the lives they had paused to watch a mortal girl live. No one watches now. No one is afraid to breathe, in case she stops. What she makes now does not hang in a hall. It waits in corners. It shines for a moment when light catches it. Then rain takes it, or a passing hand removes it without knowing anything was lost. Because she will not stop. She cannot stop. That is the exact shape of what was taken. She still weaves. Not to say something. Not to be seen. Because stopping is no longer available. When was the last time you made something and did not need it to prove you were still here? And when you stop, does it feel like rest or disappearance? That's not a life. That's what's left of one